the war, we have something called the Judenzahlung. The Judenzahlung. One of the assertions, very quickly after the war begins, one of the big assertions about Jews in Germany was they were shirkers. German Jews were not really fighting on the front lines. They weren't doing their part. Oh, everybody knows you go to the doctor's office, or you go to the some government bureaucracy or building or whatever, you're going to see Jews working there. And they're not in the front lines doing their part. They have all these cushy backline, behind the lines jobs, soft government jobs, or in the professions. But the Jews aren't fighting. Right? The Jews aren't at the front line doing what they need to do. They're not serving. So in October of 1916, the war minister, the minister of war for Germany, his name was Wild von Hohenborn. Wild von Hohenborn. And he sets out to conduct a census of just how many Jews are actually fighting. Now, Hohenborn himself is incredibly anti-Semitic. And he commissions this study to prove that the Jews are not contributing enough. And it's kind of a way of redirecting a lot of anger against maybe the government for the war not going well toward the Jews. Okay, that's kind of his logic here. Hohenborn directed, quote, "The War Ministry is continuously receiving complaints from the population that large numbers of men of the Israelite faith who are fit for military service are either exempt from military duties or evading their obligation to serve under every conceivable pretext. According to these reports, large numbers of Jews in military service are also said to have obtained assignments in administration or clerical posts far away from the front lines, either with rear echelon or in the homeland." You had anti-Semitism in Germany prior to the war. And the reality was, when the war breaks out, German Jews saw this as an opportunity to prove their loyalty to the state and to show that these anti-Semitic attacks were not accurate. So, when the war begins, you actually have vast numbers of Jews join up. In fact, you have a disproportionate percentage of German Jews fight in the war than their numbers there. In fact, at that time, when the census takes place, somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 Jews were serving in Germany's armed forces. Somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 Jews were serving in Germany's armed forces. Over the course of the war, about 12,000 Jews die in the war. About 12,000 Jews die in the war. And about 35,000 Jews had actually received citations, awards that proved their bravery in the war. About 35,000 had received citations. So when the census is completed, Hohenborn is presented with the findings. And of course the findings say, no, Jews are well represented, overrepresented in the army. Well, instead of publishing that, he buries it. It was not what he wanted to hear. He was an anti-Semite. He wanted to prove that the Jews were shirkers, and in fact the evidence proved just the opposite. When he says, I want to spare German feelings, he actually, the way he phrased it was to make it sound as though the Jews were doing poorly. So I'm trying to spare their feelings by making it seem like there aren't enough Jews fighting. So it was a way that it was calculated to make them look like they were guilty of shirking their duty. Many Jews protested. They actually sought to get this record made public. They wanted to refute the accusations, but they were not allowed to view the records. Now, after World War I, because of this experience in World War I, because of the way anti-Semitism reared its head in World War I, many Jews after the war will take up the cause of Zionism. And in fact, in 1917, the British had actually declared their willingness to help create a Jewish state in Palestine. So they begin to take up the cause of Zionism. Now, these accusations of Jewish shirking in the war are going to be very important, as we will see, because once the war is over, we're going to have the stab in the back theory, the stab in the back myth, which tells that Jews were responsible for stabbing Germany in the back during the war, right? And that's going to really gain traction there. So they're saying, look, we're actively participating in this war, but this anti-Semitism, which we know is so rampant in Europe at this time, they're not going to escape that, and that's going to be a critical part here of the German experience in World War I.